Obamacare. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Stupid people are ruining America.
The president just wants to take care of you. He just doesn't think you're able to do it for yourself.
There's a very thin line between communism, progressivism, Marxism, socialism.
The empire will strike back.
You still don't know that this was political.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of America Our Way. I am your host, Dustin Hoyt. It's been a great week. I hope you all have enjoyed it here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. I hope you've been listening to the other shows. I hope you have been liking the pictures on the page, facebook.com/America Our Way, and following me on Twitter at America Our Way. If not, now would be a good time to do so. Don't worry, I'll wait. Okay. There have been some significant headlines in the news this week. Most notably, in my opinion, would be the Edward Snowden exclusive interview on NBC. Now, I'm not quite sure why Edward Snowden chose NBC as his venue, but Brian Williams did a fairly decent job of interviewing him, I think. I appreciate the way that the coverage was posed for both viewpoints. It was, there are a lot of people who don't understand the Snowden situation, and they needed the dual coverage, if you will, to try and understand the whole situation. Quite a few warhawks on the Republican side and blatant, flagrant Obama supporters on the left that cannot abide a person whistleblowing under his regime. But we must forgive them. They know not what they do. Now, the most interesting thing to me about the Snowden special, which you can see if you go to NBC.com, they have the whole thing online, and that's actually where I watched it. I was not fortunate enough to catch the whole thing live. I would have live tweeted it, live posted about it, had I been that fortunate, but alas, there are bills to pay, and until this radio show pays said bills, such is life. But Edward Snowden sat down with Brian Williams of NBC for a very long interview, which of course was edited down for the hour-long format with commercials. But I feel like he touched down on the main points, and one of which is why he is in Russia. A lot of people have speculated that he is at the leisure of the Russian government. He is in Putin's pocket or has been flipped by the Kremlin, and that's really not the case. And Snowden laughed at the notion that was the case, and I honestly believe the guy. I mean, Brian Williams came out and asked him, have you met the president? Do you give information to them, etc.? And he was like, I've never met Putin. I am not even on speaking terms with the Russian government. They just gave me asylum. And it's funny because he took precautions that any American whistleblower would do if they were walking into Russia. Namely, making sure that they are carrying no information whatsoever, nor the ability to access said information. And because he was able to do that, he was able to avoid the fingernail pulling, toe and finger crushing, waterboarding Russian spy techniques. Fortunate for us. Now, what I found most interesting about the Snowden interview was the fact that he relayed to the American people that he actually is more important than the administration would lead us to believe. Even some Republicans, people in government have been saying, he's inflating his importance, he inflates his ability to access information. And it's hilarious because they say those things, and then he consistently had information ready with Glenn Greenwald at the UK newspaper he works for to provide and debunk whatever it was that the administration consistently was putting out about him. I don't know if all of you are familiar with my position on Snowden, but I personally think the guy is a hero. I think that Edward Snowden did a great service to the American people, and I agree with what Ron Paul has said about the charges against him. The American government has charged him with counts of espionage and divulging information, etc., saying that he gave information to people who were not cleared to have access to it, namely the American people and the American press. Now, what's most interesting to me is the fact that Snowden has asked and called for repeatedly the American government to divulge any instance of his release of information hurting anyone. And the American government has failed to do so. They have failed to release any information that indicates that his disclosure had anything to do with anybody in the American government, in the Secret Service, in the intelligence community, any citizens for that matter, being hurt by the revelations of the mass spying program. And quite frankly, let me posit this to all of you. If you work a job at which you see the American government blatantly and vehemently disregarding the constraints of the Constitution, would you or would you not relay that information to the American press? Let me tell you, if you find yourself to be one of the very ignorant individuals that would see the scrapping of the Constitution by our American government and keep it to yourself, I invite you to remove your head from your nether regions and stop licking the boots of government. Anyone that finds what Snowden did to be espionage effectively is calling the American people an enemy of the American people. What Snowden did was let us know that our own government is spying on us. He let us know that our government was doing everything in its power to find out everything about us that they had no business knowing. That includes metadata, and as he revealed in this interview, the ability to see you typing an email, backspacing parts of it, and then rewriting it. They can see that in real time. This means if you're sending a Facebook message, they see what you typed originally, saw you delete parts of it, and then post the later corrected version. They are able to see what you are doing on your computer in real time. He also revealed that any phone connected to a network that said intelligence agency has access to, the government has the ability to tap into that phone and turn it into a camera to take pictures or a microphone to record whatever it is that's going on with you. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the rights to privacy that are given to American citizens. The constitutional right, the Fourth Amendment right to security in your persons and papers, is a natural right. You have a natural right protecting you from government searches and seizures, from them rifling through your possessions, whether that be your house, your files, your emails, etc., for any sort of government activity whatsoever. They have no legal authority to go through your possessions without a warrant. And since the U.S. government cannot get a warrant for the entire American people under our Constitution, they have no right under the Constitution to monitor all of us. Now, a great many of you are conservatives or former conservatives, and you are of the opinion that everything that can be done must be done in order to protect our country from terrorists. Well, let me present this to you. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I've never hid that or lied about it. That's just the way it is. I grew up in a Middle Eastern country. Never had any interaction with that government. Never had any interaction with the religion there outside of intellectual debate or friendly conversation. And yet, it is likely that I find myself on a government watch list simply because of my connections to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Now tell me, as a constitutionalist, as a classical liberal like Thomas Jefferson or James Madison, I find myself in the unique position of defending our natural rights and also probably being on the short list of those monitored for violating our way of life. Now, while I do have nothing to hide from the government, the idea that they can rifle through my possessions at will is disgusting. It is disheartening and it is revolting. And I'm not quite sure how to convey that notion to the rest of you simply based on what they're doing. If you're not already disgusted by what the NSA is doing, I'm not quite sure how to tell you that you should be. I could make the argument that police are on record of killing almost a dog a day in any of their raids. I could make the argument that you're not a criminal and therefore shouldn't have to live as such. I could argue that your rights are your rights and they shouldn't be violated. I could also argue that if this right is violated, why not violate the others? They're each equal amendments under the Bill of Rights. Why should this not be just one of many thrown to the wayside because America? Well, the answer is a clear and resounding because it is a natural right. Natural rights are endowed by your Creator, whether you believe that to be science, nature, God, Buddha, Allah, whatever. It is irrelevant how you get them, but it is relevant that you understand that you are born with them. You are born with these rights. You are born to the right to a free press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to own a firearm, freedom to privacy in your persons and papers, the ability to go unmolested, etc. You are under no obligation to house troops. You are under no obligation whatsoever to the U.S. government except by those that are instituted via the government, albeit arguably unconstitutionally, such as taxes. And the thought that there are so many Americans who are okay with and even support the government taking these rights in the name of freedom do not understand what freedom means. For example, if you support the troops, if you believe that these heroes sacrificed their lives for our freedom, then you cannot consequently also believe that you should forgo your Fourth Amendment privileges based on the notion that terrorists exist in this world, that there are people who want to kill Americans alive today. Because then you spit on the graves of all of the soldiers who have given their lives in protection of freedom to this country. Now, whether or not you agree with the wars is irrelevant, because these soldiers did not necessarily sign up for a war. They didn't sign a paper saying, hell yeah, send me to Iraq. I'm going to kill me some Tajis. That's irrelevant. The reality is that these men and women gave up their lives for your freedom, period. They are the most abused and victimized people in our society. And this is confounded by the example of the Veterans Administration. I invite all of you to embrace the notion that your rights are not alienable, regardless of technology or expectation from a Leviathan government. We'll have more when we come back.
Hi, this is Alan Bordius of theirfinesthour.net. Catch me here on VLR Monday nights and also on Tuesday nights on the Roundtable of Extreme Liberty.
Now, Edward Snowden made some other points that I think are worth noting. Namely, he considers himself a patriot and wishes that he could go home, but will not do so because he knows that he's going to be thrown in prison as soon as he gets back here. Now, you had John Kerry come on to television shows today, namely MSNBC this morning, and basically say this guy is a terrorist of sorts. He should come back and face the music, and if he was a real patriot, he would have thrown himself on the mercy of the justice system, etc. I have to say, seeing the polling of the American people, seeing what the American people believe in terms of what your rights are and what is right and what is wrong, I don't blame him for running. I have no qualms whatsoever about what he has done. The fact that he has had to seek political asylum is not in any way detrimental to his character. If you do what is best for your nation and you know that it will likely end in your death or a lifetime incarceration without a fair trial, which you are entitled to as a free citizen of the earth, then you would flee if you knew that your government was so tyrannical that you would never receive or benefit from those rights that you are guaranteed under our Constitution. The bottom line is, Edward Snowden is in fact a patriot. Saying that he isn't is to spit in the eye of veterans, as I said earlier. If you ask a veteran what they go to war for, they'll tell you freedom and the country. The country is not the government. Everyone under the sun should understand that patriotism has nothing to do with the government. And if anybody has seen the approval rate of Congress, you know this to be true. Edward Snowden is a patriot for what he did. And it's important to note that you've got people like Obama coming out and saying, oh, I'm not going to scramble the jets for a 29-year-old hacker, when in reality, he submitted complaints to his superiors. He submitted complaints to the government to let them know, hey, you guys are breaking the rules, and was basically told, don't make waves or else. And so Edward Snowden decided to set his entire life on fire, to destroy his family life, his love life. He had a girlfriend, all because he values freedom higher than he values anything else. And I think it is important to note that how many people today would sacrifice their entire life as they know it, their salary, their family, their loved ones, the possibility of seeing them again, the ability to support themselves, all for the sake of the country and what's good for it. The only people I know that do this are the military. Many people in the military sacrifice their very lives so that we can live in a free society. Now, whether that is true based on the actions of the government is subject for debate. But that is what these men and women sign up for. They forfeit their lives, sign their butts up to Uncle Sam, so they can defend our freedoms. Whether or not you support the wars is an entirely different argument. But supporting the fact that these guys and gals did what they did to support our country, our people, our freedom, is not up for debate. And I would argue that Edward Snowden is just as noble. I mean, the idea that this guy may lose the woman he loved, his family, seeing them again, any notions of a family life, any notions of normalcy, even just living in a place securely without problem. You can't help but respect it. I mean, if you need further example of the fear he deals with daily, just listen to what Brian Williams said about how he entered the hotel room for the interview. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. As much as I dislike NBC News and their slant, I have to agree that they did okay with the coverage. I said that earlier, but even so, it bears repeating. Snowden entered the floor where the hotel room was, the interview was to be held, via the stairwell rather than the elevator. And it's not because he's concerned with his fitness. He nonchalantly entered the hotel and took the stairs because he was afraid he was going to be arrested by Americans. He was afraid that the U.S. military had set up a ruse to extradite him back to the States. And that is a fair fear. That is a show of intelligence on his part. He could have very easily been apprehended in a ruse such as the premise of an interview with a news organization. But if you listen to the things he said, you know, how many people, without saying goodbye to their families, set their entire lives on fire for the good of the nation? And he said it was because he could not sleep at night. He could not sleep at night knowing what the U.S. government was doing and not saying anything about it. How would you define your life? How would you value yourself when it comes to revealing something as egregious as the NSA spying? Would you be able to set your whole life on fire? Just everything you know, leave it to save the country. Your kids, your family, your dog, your house, your apartment, whatever. All of your possessions. Put everything that you can in a backpack and take off. Because that's what Edward Snowden did. At the very least, even if you don't agree with him, you have to respect the notion that he cared enough about your freedom to forego everything he owns and cares about simply to tell you that your rights are being violated. And what is even more egregious and disturbing than any of this is what John Kerry said earlier today. John Kerry came out saying, if Edward Snowden wants to come home, we would be delighted to have that. We would have him on a plane today. The State Department has no problem arranging and organizing Edward Snowden to come back to America and be picked up upon landing to be placed into custody in order to secure his arrest. But they cannot be bothered to secure the freedom of an American Marine who is imprisoned in Mexico and has been for some time. They cannot manage to secure the freedom for a Christian missionary who was arrested in Iran for trying to spread the word of God to people in that region. Now, there is, I'm sure, another side to that pastor story, because Christianity and Judaism are not illegal in Iran, surprisingly. But it is important to note. The State Department says they have no issue getting Snowden a flight into America the second he wants it, securing that for him, but they cannot managed to secure the freedom for one of our finest being held by the Mexican authorities. Doesn't that just make you sick to your stomach? Doesn't that just make you question the viability of our own government? If we would secure the arrest and transport of a figure who's arguably a patriot, the majority of people would say is a patriot, but we cannot manage to secure the freedom for one of our soldiers who simply missed the turnaround trying to head back to the border of America. And this isn't even the first time this has happened. There was another American soldier who had come into Mexico to hunt and was arrested. And he was in jail in Mexico for months on end, years even. And it took forever to get his release. I would argue that the State Department could easily make a phone call and make this happen. They could free this soldier for his simple mistake. I mean, I listened to the 911 calls myself. The guy was like, I guess I'm in Mexico. These are Mexican authorities talking to me. And the 911 operator's like, well, I guess I can't really help you. Sorry, you're not in America anymore. And he's like, but I missed the U-turn. I didn't see one. He's like, and the 911 operator says, well, you know, if you missed the U-turn, then you were way out of America. And he's like, but I didn't see it. I didn't mean to go into Mexico. But this is the reality we live in. We now live in a country where the State Department and the executive branch can't be bothered to use their powers to get a soldier out of freedom, but would be able to do everything in their power to get Snowden back to the U.S. to stand trial. This is the same State Department and the same executive branch that couldn't even be bothered to check and see if Snowden had made complaints before leaking the documents he did. We know for a fact, it's been confirmed, that Snowden leaked his information to his supervisors before he went to the media, saying, this is illegal, this is unconstitutional, we need to stop this. And the executive branch could not be bothered to confirm that information before sending information out. There were Republicans in the House who said that he had exaggerated his position, despite the fact that he was a special guest speaker on Chinese cyber warfare and hacking for several conferences, at least 3, where he gave lectures on hacking. What kind of American that is giving lectures on how the Chinese are hacking and interfering with American freedom would also regard our own government as breaching the freedoms? If you're a member of the Tea Party, if you believe in freedom at all, if you support same-sex marriage, if you support freedom of religion, you cannot support that position and also condemn Edward Snowden for telling the American people that their government was abusing their rights without them knowing. You can't do it without being a massive hypocrite. And, ladies and gents, as you know, Jesus hates a hypocrite. It's just the way it is. I didn't make the rules. I just sound them out in this microphone for you. But it really disgusts me that this man destroyed his whole life, and so many Americans just say, oh, we expected the government was spying on us. They have that technology. Or, it's ignorant to believe the government isn't doing this to us. Or anything of that nature. I can't even tell you, when the Snowden leaks first came out, I was already in the news business. And people said, oh, well, if you don't think the government's doing this, then you're an idiot. I'm sorry, but that's not how rights work. If the government suddenly up and discontinued the Second Amendment, there would be a blatant revolution in this country. There would be an uprising. If the government said you no longer have a First Amendment right, people would be rioting in the streets. But because it's the Fourth Amendment, people are lazy. They just, kind of expected us not to have that right anymore. Why is one amendment more important than the other? Why are some rights more important than others? I cannot, for one, understand this position at all. I can't wrap my head around it. For me, all rights are equal, and the idea that I don't have access to certain rights because of technology or because government has grown is disgusting and unacceptable. And I think that everyone should look strongly in the mirror and say, do I believe government has the right to spy on me because I own a cell phone? We'll have more when we come back.
This is Liz Harrison, and you know, I have no idea how many times people have told me conservative women can't be sexy. Well, we can prove them wrong. Listen here on Vigilant Liberty Radio, Friday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern, the Conservative Feminist Show, where the ladies are kink-servative.
Alright, we're back, everybody. Now, there is something I wanted to touch on that I've been doing a lot lately. Some of you know, some of you don't, that I have a degree in social science and sociology. And a large part of that is understanding culture and the way we interact with each other. And as such, I've kind of taken it upon myself to take positions on social issues on the show, mainly reading articles. I believe I did one on weight and preference for a sexual partner, etc. But today, I want to talk about something that's been extrapolated from an event in the news. As many of you know, the shooting by that misogynist in California. He made his manifesto and was basically angry at the world for girls not liking him, etc. It was Santa Barbara, California, killed 6 students. That would be one Elliot Rodger. He was the son, 22-year-old, of one of the directors of the Hunger Games movies. And the guy grew up in a multi-million-dollar mansion in one of his houses, drove a brand new BMW, was going to college, and arguably was not an unattractive guy. I mean, when you look at him, you don't see an ugly chud. But the 22-year-old college student in Santa Barbara killed 6 people, including girls, tried to break into a sorority house and kill them all, but couldn't get in. Drove around running people down and killing them until he finally killed himself. Now, there is an article on the Daily Beast that upset me by a Mr. Arthur Chu. He claims to be, a nerdy guy and remarks on nerd culture, and he's a feminist, and I don't mean feminist in the equality for all sense. I mean feminist in the men are evil sense. And he wrote an article for the Daily Beast this week that I think is reprehensible. One of my friends on Facebook, a Miss Rebecca Johansson, shout out, posted this article, and it put me in a tizzy. And I use that word despite its feminist connotations, because the guy basically blamed modern television and movies and video games for giving quote-unquote nerdy guys this unreal expectation of women coming around to your affections based on your perceived effort put into it. The best example being, as the author used in this article, the writer, Steve Urkel. He was dead set on getting Laura. He loved her, and did everything he could to get her to come around, including inventing a machine to turn himself into Stefan, the suave model guy that she ends up with, basically. And he credits this whole notion of media feeding, Skippy from Family Ties, Niles on Frasier, Screech, into this notion that American nerdy men need to realize that the idea that working for a mate or love or affection is a fairy tale only present in video games, and it's something that we should disregard. And it's something that is leading men, some unbalanced, nerdy men, to believe that they are somehow wronged when women reject their advances. Those of you who know me personally know I love me some video games. I love pop culture. Big fan of movies, TV, video games, etc. And that was a large part of why I, ventured into sociology for my degree path. It's because I am a third culture kid. I am someone who, I'm an American, but I grew up overseas. So even in America, I've kind of grown up as kind of an outsider. I mean, I had to relearn how to be an American when I came to this country. And mainly that was being involved with other people, how to interact with them. I didn't understand. And I learned how to do that. That's just the way it was. I mean, it was either learn to adapt or be an outcast. And I learned. It was in my interest. But Mr. Chu here is trying to blame the lot of this guy's misogyny, if you will, his hate of women, on video game culture, saying that if we really need to get that people's bodies and other people's love is not something that can be taken, nor even something that can be earned, can only be given freely by choice or not, and that if our quote-unquote gender is going to be worth a damn, we need to learn that. We need to grow up. Now, his main argument was that men have this notion, nerdy men, that comes from Revenge of the Nerds, that one of the characters, the main characters, put on a Darth Vader mask and slept with his jock arch nemesis' girlfriend, and she was so impressed with his sexual prowess that she dumped the jock and became that guy's girlfriend. But he basically raped her because he tricked her into thinking that it was her boyfriend at the time. And while I will concede that putting on a mask and having sex with someone under the guise of being someone else is, in fact, rape, I cannot read this article, Your Princess is in Another Castle on the Daily Beast, and identify it as anything but unreasonable drivel. The guy is a blatant idiot, and that is most confounded and evident when he begins to reference John Galt as a rapist. And anybody who has read Atlas Shrugged, as I have, and heralded it as a true work of individualism, as a guide on how to be successful, you know that John Galt did not rape her. She said multiple times that he was the man she had always been looking for. He was the man she had always idealized, had always desired, and did not know he existed. In layman's terms, it was her dream man. John Galt was Dagny Taggart's dream man. And he took control of the situation when they eventually got together. But to say that he raped Dagny Taggart is a very obvious and badly written act of intellectual dishonesty. That's not even a question. It's not even a subjective definition. It's just a fact. To say that Dagny Taggart was raped by John Galt is to not understand the book, and to not, frankly, understand how sexual interaction works. If a girl, they always say no means no. If she's not saying no, if she's not fighting you off, if she gives her consent through her actions, she is not saying no. Now, I'm not saying go out and mess with a mute girl who can't physically yell no, but anybody who's read that book knows it's a love story about John Galt and Dagny. It's a love story about those two. And this author came out and said that John Galt is the type of man that inspires nerds to rape people. And even went on to say, oh, I never said anything when my friends committed rape, and that's bad, and it's because of video games. And I'm like, no. I'm sorry, but if one of my friends proceeded to rape a girl, I'd just beat the hell out of him and then call the cops. The fact that he sat by while his friends raped girls is disgusting and not at all a somehow function of culture. It's his own incompetency as a decent human being. And it in no way reflects my gender, myself, or nerd culture. Let me tell you what nerd culture is about. Let me tell you what video games have taught me and every reasonable human being about interactions with women. It is not that your actions alone or what you deem is adequate earns you the prize. It is, first and foremost, their decision on you being worthy to be a mate, to be a significant other. When you look at video games, even the most raunchy of video games, even the most terrible of animes, when you watch some of these cartoons, etc., you don't see a man grabbing a woman and forcing himself on her, except in examples of what not to do. I mean, there are countless animes on Netflix where this is apparent. There are countless video games where this is obvious. I mean, just looking at my own video game collection, I can flat out tell you. For instance, Mass Effect. You don't have the main character in that video game series forcing himself on females because he has decided that that female is now his property. He has not decided that that female should want him and will want him, and so he can do whatever he wants. Video games teach you to be a paragon of manhood. Name one video game where a fat, obese, persistent nerd gets the girl simply because he pestered her a lot. Even Steve Urkel had to transform himself into Stefan to get anywhere with Laura. He had to change his own genetic structure to get the girl. And you're going to try and tell me that somehow that character inspired someone to mass kill? That is intellectual irresponsibility at its worst. absolutely, irreprehensibly wrong. The fact that the Daily Beast kept that up on their website is just irresponsible. I mean, if you look at, say, Man of Steel with Lois Lane, Superman had to save the world. How many times he had to defeat how many supervillains before Lois Lane was even interested in him? You look at Steve Urkel changed his entire genetic structure. He changed who he is as a human being just to get Laura to like him. Tell me what part of that inspires violence and rape. None of that does. Now, he did make a large part of his argument about the Big Bang Theory, and we will get into Big Bang Theory in our next segment. But the point is, this guy's a hack, and I recommend you reading the article. I'll post it up on the page for y'all to read today. It'll be in one of the earlier posts. So, take a look at that and let me know what you think in the comments. We'll have more when we come back.
Hi, this is Taylor, and while you're listening to all the other great shows here on Vigilant Liberty Radio, be sure to check out my show on Saturday nights called Saturday Night Cigar Lounge. You never know what we're going to talk about. It's always a fun time. That's Saturday Night Cigar Lounge, Saturday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, here on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
All right, we're back. Now we're talking about this article by one Mr. I keep forgetting his name. He's not important. Arthur Chu. It's in the entertainment section on the Daily Beast. Your princess is in I can't speak today. Your princess is in another castle. Misogyny, entitlement, and nerds. And his basic premise is nerds and men in general are taught that we are entitled to women simply because of things that we do, etc. That somehow women are a prize to be earned, like salary, nice car, good job. And that if you do those things, the woman will just appear as a prize. And let me tell you, I am someone who firmly believes in fitness and working out, and a lot of that is a direct result of comic books, of movies, of TV shows, of video games. I firmly believe that if I want to get the most attractive mate, it is my responsibility as a man to be a paragon of manliness. I believe that I should lift weights, I should be strong, I should be fit, I should support myself, I should be responsible, and I should be everything a woman desires. And those are things that I was taught not only in my childhood growing up, but by video games. If you look at any video game, the protagonist, the main character, is going to be a character who is, although I hate to say the word, selfless, sacrifices himself and what he wants to get the girl, the princess of his dreams. He does everything he can to save the world and do what is right. And then he gets the girl. I cannot think of a single video game where the main character simply does everything in his power to get the girl just to get the girl. Except for one of these more perverted video games like Leisure Suit Larry or whatever. And for those of you who don't know what that is, count your lucky stars. But it's basically a game where the character is a horny college kid trying to get girls unsuccessfully. Probably a nerd dream of sorts. Pretty common reference in terms of video games. But I want to talk about Big Bang Theory, because Big Bang Theory was a large part of this article. And the author's argument is that because of the way Leonard pursues the hot girl, and I'm not even going to use her name to try and prove this point, that it enforces the idea in nerds that all you have to do is put forth all of the effort you can muster, and eventually the girl will come around. As if somehow your attractiveness to them, how attractive they find you, is not relevant. Now, arguably, there are some disturbed individuals that do believe this, but that's just the thing. They are disturbed. And conversely, you've got individuals who believe they are hot stuff and that women should just appear for them simply because they exist, whether that be on money, status, or looks. And that is the main problem that we have with Elliot Rodger. And this isn't being addressed, and I think it should be. Elliot Rodger, in his manifesto, said that he would basically go on walks around the neighborhood and expected women to just fall at his feet while he was walking around. That just walking around in his neighborhood, he would find a girlfriend based simply on the way he looks or the way he's dressed. Just being in public somehow entitled him to a woman's affection. Let me tell you, I walk my dog every night, and I don't get a number every night. I don't get a phone number, and my dog is freaking cute, and so am I. But this guy took it personally when he walked out in public and women didn't fall at his feet. Never mind the fact that they may have boyfriends, they may be lesbians, or they may just think he's an ugly chud, or he may have said something obnoxious to them. Never mind any of that. The fact that they rejected him at all, or did not immediately take their clothes off and say, "Take me in the bushes," inspired his shooting spree. And what's worse is this guy planned it for years, because of the way women spurned him. I would argue that the biggest problem culture presents, in this case, the thing that is most readily apparent, is not misogyny, it's not sexism, it's not what we're teaching men in the culture. It's this theory of nobody's a loser, of everybody's a winner in our culture. When every kid gets a trophy, they're going to be upset later in life when they grow up and they don't get a trophy just for being. And I would argue that this is closer to what happened with Elliot Rodger than anything else. This kid had everything handed to him on a silver platter. His dad was a very successful director, and yet he still thought somehow that, his money, his looks, his existence entitled him to love and affection. And that is the main problem with this kid. It's not video games. It's not that he taught women, he was taught women should be earned. It was that he believed he deserved, he earned, that he was entitled to love and affection simply because he existed. Simply because he walked out in public, he should be able to meet a woman that he deemed worthy. Now, a big part of that was the fact that he was a virgin. He had a huge problem with that. He was a 22-year-old virgin. And quite frankly, if you're 22 years old, driving a brand new car, living in a $1 million house in Santa Barbara, if you are not capable of picking up a girl when your daddy directed Hunger Games, it's not the girls that are the problem. If my dad had directed Hunger Games, I would have had so many girls that wanted to meet Katniss Everdeen. Let me tell you, this kid wasn't getting girls because he was a creepy piece of crap. Because clearly girls were sensing his mental instability and running for the hills as a smart person would. I mean, the fact that this guy planned this for years and was unable to find happiness or a girlfriend in the time between hatching this plan and making it happen says more about him than it does about culture. And a lot of people have tried to discount the whole mental health argument because cops found him to be an upstanding, polite young man. And look, any crazy person can pretend to be sane. I mean, even the most disturbed individual can convince a cop to leave him alone, especially when they have yet to do anything wrong. When his parents called for a welfare check, they did the wrong thing. If my parents were concerned about me going on a shooting spree, I would have had the door taken off my room. I would have had every inch of my room searched. And I would have had the car keys taken away. I would have been Guantanamo Bay in my parents' house. After they beat the hell out of me, after they put me in a straitjacket and called a mental health facility and had a therapist over to check me out 2 or 3 times. There is no reason whatsoever that people can make the connection between misogyny and what this guy did. Yeah, he hated women. He did. But that was a symptom of his mental illness, not a symptom of societal problems. His problems were not the cause of video games. They were not the cause of movies. This kid could have promised any girl a part in one of his daddy's movies and been able to get them in the sack if that's what he was after. But it's not. He was a quiet kid by all accounts and just expected women to approach him and be like, "Oh my gosh, you're so pretty. Please take me now." Anybody that's thinking that is either a Calvin Klein model or a psychopath. And if the YouTube videos are any indicator, this kid was a psychopath. Video games taught me more than anything that you have to be strong. You have to be strong and manly, and you have to be powerful. You have to lift weights and fight. You have to be a warrior. You have to be a god among men to have women throwing themselves at your feet. Look at any video game where the women throw themselves at your feet. Example, God of War. It's about a Spartan who killed his family and then went on a journey to redeem himself, if you will, and eventually killed Ares, the Greek god of war. Not Ares, Mars, the Roman god of war, so that he could become the new god of war. And in that game, he had women throwing themselves at his feet. But they already knew who he was because he was a freaking god. He was a legend among men. He was like Hercules. Tell me if you have seen women throw themselves at Tom Brady's feet or heard about it. How many women have you heard say, if so-and-so came to town, I would be on my back so fast? Now, you could argue that's a societal problem, but usually it's in jest and a little bit true. Imagine if Channing Tatum showed up at a college campus. He could have almost any girl he wanted. But Channing Tatum is in really good shape and very successful. This kid was not in really good shape. He was not extremely muscular and had not proven himself through dancing or making movies. He was a punk college kid. So the idea that he was trying to be alpha or trying to emulate video games is insane. Let me tell you something about being alpha. If you want to be an alpha male, it involves being able to take care of yourself and get stuff done. And it involves being incredibly attractive. I should know. It's a terrible burden to bear. I joke, but really, if you are not lifting weights and just are completely ripped and people are wondering if you're on steroids, you don't look like the characters in video games. Now, arguably, there are some video games where the main character is smaller and ripped. This guy still didn't stack up to them either. So this whole notion that somehow media entitlement to sex taught him that is just blatantly wrong. I mean, let's face it, people. If your kids are learning from video games that they should not have to intellectually engage a woman, then they're not playing any video game I've ever heard of, and I've played most of them. I mean, the idea that Mario fighting Bowser for Princess Peach is somehow teaching boys that all they need to do is beat up a giant lizard and they can get their girl, or the idea that Big Bang Theory is teaching people that all they need to do is knock on Penny's door a lot and be really nice to her and she'll like them, is crazy. It's absolutely insane. And I hope that enough of you will reject these notions and will reject the idea that video games or movies are teaching this to people, because in reality they are not. Nobody honestly can make those claims. No honest person can make those claims and be serious. Alright, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I am Dustin Hoyt. This is America Our Way. You are listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio, and we will catch you next time.